Hello there and welcome to episode 28 of the Unqualified Opinions Sports Podcast. I'm your host as always, Marko Yerkovich. We've got a lot of great stuff on today's episode, including a discussion about how great Luka Doncic is and where he ranks amongst the best in the NBA, the potential for Lionel Messi to be leaving Barcelona, the club he's known his whole life, our picks for the first and second round of the NBA playoffs, and of course Bayern Munich winning the Champions League final. As always, joining me is Will Byerman.
Yep, we are back for another season. It's great to be here, boys.
And of course, the always enigmatic Tim Seipel.
We are back in grooving, people.
And before we begin, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the YouTube channel, and leave your own unqualified opinions in the comments section down below. So let's get right into it with the discussion about the greatness of the aforementioned Luka Doncic. Just some quick numbers to run down. He's sixth in the league in scoring at 28.8 points per game this season, third in assists at 8.8, and he's top 20 in rebounds with 9.4. He led the Mavericks to first in offensive efficiency and third in total offense, and he's only 21 years old. So your guys' general thoughts on the placement of Luka Doncic amongst the pantheon of the current greats in the NBA?
Well, first I'd like to make a note. When you said first in offensive rating, that's in all of league history.
Right.
They have the highest offensive rating of any team to ever play basketball, and that's Luka with Porzingis missing time and just kind of a strange, bizarre cast of characters. We know that Rick Carlisle and the Mavericks can get the best out of some pretty surprising players, but he's had guys like Dorian Finney-Smith and Maxi Kleber who really aren't plus offensive players historically. They've been major pieces and starters for the Mavericks. They've had very little Jalen Brunson. Dwight Powell's been out a lot, and Tim Hardaway and Seth Curry were pretty inefficient before, and the Mavericks have really kind of switched that around. So you can't put it all on Luka because it's a Mavericks team thing, but at the same time, Luka Doncic, easily one of the top 5 players in the game of basketball right now. Easily all NBA. I don't think we've ever seen a better sophomore than Luka. I mean, you guys know I'm a Mavs fan. You know about all about Luka. This is not news to me.
Yeah, I definitely think Luka has proven himself to be easily a top 10 player in the league. I don't know if I'd go as far as top 5, but he is right there up there with the best. I think the craziest thing about this is he is 21 years old. For how young he is, but how much of a leader he is on the court. His age really does not matter compared to his leadership ability, which he has proven time and time again with his clutch shots and with kind of rallying the team together. As aforementioned, he doesn't really have a crazy good supporting cast, but with his help, things have been moving in the right direction for the Mavericks.
Yeah, and as far as I'm concerned, he's very easily a top 10 player, and he's a borderline top 5 player. And obviously, you know, in any situation, I would almost rather have Doncic on the court with the ball in his hands, as he proved against the Clippers in Game 4. I would rather have him over almost any other player. And it's a bit hard to rank those very top tier players right now because KD and Steph have missed a lot of time. Klay Thompson has missed a lot of time. And even Russ, he's been healthy for a lot of this year, but he missed a lot of time this year. But of course, you know, LeBron, Giannis, AD, Kawhi, Harden, they're up in that top 10 with Damian Lillard. But Doncic is getting up there. Like you said, I believe he's an all-NBA first-team guard this year. And he's certainly top 10 on his way to top 5, in my opinion. If I had to put a number on it, I'd probably say 6 or 7, but easily in the next season or two, he could be the best player in the league. And this next point is maybe not as pertinent now that we've kind of discussed his placement amongst the top players, but I guess it's still an argument some people could have with maybe Zion or other players. But is there any other player in the league that you'd rather start a franchise with tomorrow than Luka Doncic?
It's not even close, dude. Come on. Yeah. Luka's in his second year. He's 21. And in Game 4, that was a signature game for any player of any age, at any time, with any number of awards. Like, it doesn't matter which player you are. The Mavericks were down by like 20 at times in that game against a team that everyone thought was going to be much better than them, that has more stars, more of a reserve. Like, it's just the Clippers are a better overall team than the Mavericks. Porzingis is also out. Luka put that team on his back for the entire game, kept them back, got them back into the game, got them into overtime, and then hit a step back 3 to win the game. There are very few players who can completely carry their team and can be that guy who steps in big moments. He's only 21. Like, cool, Zion can do some dunks. He's pretty efficient. He can barely stay on the floor. Ja Morant comes to mind. He could be pretty good, but Ja Morant also struggled in the playoffs, and those guys are just rookies. I don't think there's anyone who even comes close to matching Luka's potential right now. And not just potential, because we're looking at a player who in his second year is already pretty much a well-established NBA star. And no one else is like that.
Yeah, Tim, your thoughts on starting the franchise with Doncic or anyone else?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely no doubt about that. Doncic is the player that you want on your team right now, especially if you're kind of starting over and starting your franchise rebuilding. The name that kept on coming up for me was Ja Morant. Obviously, he had a phenomenal year, very likely rookie of the year. But with all things considered, to be 21 and putting these numbers up, I mean, a 43-point triple-double from Luka Doncic to beat the Clippers in the Game 4 of their playoff series, it's just insane for someone as young and inexperienced in the NBA as he is. He is proven to be much more efficient and much better than his years may. I mean, I don't think there's anybody else I would go with other than Doncic.
And just a final point on this, I think the level of professionalism and gamesmanship he operates at, I think can be attributed to his years of professional play in Europe. Again, while he wasn't playing against NBA caliber players, he was playing in a professional environment with other professionals, and the game was treated seriously. And I think that's especially something the NBA is looking at with trying to give the G League a bit more clout amongst young players and trying to make it a viable avenue. I think Luka Doncic is a shining example of what young professionalism can do to a player. And again, like we said, he's only 21 years old, and he's already one of the best in the NBA. And speaking of Luka Doncic, we're going to move on to our picks for the remaining first round series, and then, of course, the upcoming second round series. So let's go ahead and start with that Mavericks versus Clippers series. Clippers are up 3-2.
All right, yeah, so even though I'm a Mavs fan, I really do think this one's probably over for the Mavericks. Clippers are going to win the series probably in 6. Porzingis is out probably for the rest of it. And frankly, the Mavs are in a position where we're already ahead of schedule. We stole 2 playoff games from the Clippers. We made the playoffs, period, which many people didn't think was going to happen. We're where we want to be. I'd rather have Porzingis sit out and I don't want to risk him having another catastrophic knee injury. I'd rather have him sit. I'd rather have Luka not get hurt again. As much as I'm tired of Montrezl Harrell and Marcus Morris' bullshit, and as much as I would want to see Pandemic P keep getting cooked, probably over for the Mavericks.
All right, Tim, your pick for the Clippers-Mavericks series?
Yeah, I'm not going to repeat what Will said, especially after the beatdown in Game 5. I don't see how the Mavericks will be able to win 2 in a row against the Clippers. I'd say Clippers have nailed this series down.
Joseph has the Clippers as well, as does Paul and Jared, and I do as well. Just like you guys said, it seems pretty inevitable, especially since the emergence of Paul George once again. The the Mavericks may outplay the Clippers, even in these elimination games, but the Clippers just have more talent, so it's unfortunate. Even if Dallas plays almost perfectly, they will have a hard time beating the Clippers. All right, so our next matchup is the Rockets and the Thunder, which at the time of recording is currently tied 2-2 in the series. Will, your pick?
This is by far the toughest series to predict at this point, mostly because the other series that are 2-2, it's been a lot of back and forth. Clips take 1, Mavs take 1, Clips take 1, Mavs take 1. This was 2-0 Rockets, now it's 2-2. I just think the Rockets have a better team overall. The Thunder were on fire for most of the bubble, most of the regular season, and they really haven't been able to match that energy lately. They did win the last 2 games, but they were winning games in pretty dominant fashion before the playoffs. They've kind of slumped a bit. I think the Rockets have what it takes to beat them, but I think it goes to 7.
All right, Tim, your pick?
Yeah, I think this has been one of the closer series in the first round, and the Thunder have just had a fantastic young core with Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. You got Schrader, and you got Chris Paul, who's been a seasoned vet, who in this position is knocking down clutch shots. The Houston Rockets have a reputation for choking in tough situations, and I say that the Thunder pull it out.
Really? Okay. We've got a pick for the Thunder from Paul, as well as a pick for the Thunder from Jared. But Joseph is going with the Rockets, and I'm going to have to agree with Joseph. I think the Rockets should just simply outshoot OKC. They shot 38% from 3 in Game 1, 33% in Game 2, 30 in Game 3, and 40 in Game 4. And they won the first two and they won the first two and lost the last two. It seems at random based on the performance of the Rockets, but I think if they keep shooting, eventually OKC will hit a slump. I also think in Game 5, we're hearing rumors that we could see a return of Russell Westbrook. So I think especially with that pushes them over the edge. So let's look at another Western Conference series that is still stuck in the first round. We have the Jazz with a 3-2 advantage over Denver. Will, your pick?
This is another tricky one. I'd really like to see Denver win. Big Jokic fan. I really like what the Nuggets were doing in the seeding games. Really excited to see Bol Bol is probably one of the highlight stories from those seeding games. But Utah, I really kind of thought they were dead in the water for a bit there. I mean, they've never been a great offensive team. Bojan Bogdanovic, who hasn't played at all, he had surgery in March on, I believe, his knee. But with him out, he was a 20-point scorer. So I thought the Utah offense would be able to get much of anything going. But they've really surprised me. They've stuck it out. I think they're going to win this one in 7.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree. I think the Jazz are going to pull this one out. I just I don't see how Denver can come back from 3-2. I think the Utah Jazz either win it the next game or obviously the last one they have. I think Donovan Mitchell's going to really come in and take over. And with that being said, I think the Jazz take it.
So Jared is actually going with the upset with Denver. So Denver would have to come back from the 3-2 deficit. But Joseph and Paul both agree on the Jazz for this one, and I agree with them. I think Donovan Mitchell's averaging 38 points a game in this series, which seems like quite a lot to overcome, especially when you're considering the interior dominance Rudy Gobert has exerted. I know Jamal Murray has really woken up and finally found playoff form in this series, but I think Utah, especially, since they do have a game to give, a game to lose in this series, being up 3-2, I think they'll get the better of the Denver Nuggets either in Game 6 or in Game 7, so I'm going with the Jazz. So now moving to the Eastern Conference, which is all second-round matchups. I will say we are recording this on Wednesday afternoon. The Lakers are currently up 3-1 in their series against the Trailblazers, and the Bucks are currently up 3-1 over the Magic, and we are just going to assume that they're going to win their series. So that's what we're working off of. So with that being said, we've got the Heat and the Bucks in that round. Who do you have in that one, Will?
I've been thinking a lot about this one because Bucks have not looked all that great. Chris Middleton and Eric Bledsoe's kind of always been MIA in the playoffs. Middleton really hasn't been up to his normal all-star level standard, and we really haven't seen much from the bench. The hope was someone like DiVincenzo or George Hill to really step up and kind of be that next big scorer. That hasn't happened yet. And the Heat really seem like a team that could be designed to beat the Bucks. They're a smart team. They're coached by a smart coach in Eric Spoelstra, so they can pull off the Giannis wall. That's really been the best way of defending him. They got the personnel for it with Bam and Kelly Olynyk and Myers Leonard. Leonard and Olynyk haven't played much, but they've got big enough bias to try to kind of wall up if that's what they choose to do. Jimmy Butler's just a competitor, and then they've got a lot of terrific shooters like Goran Dragic, Duncan Robinson, and Tyler Hero. That's a lot of shooters. They got more off the bench. They're a very deep team. I think it's going to be close. I kind of like to see the Heat win this one. I really could easily see them doing this, but I think I'm going to go Bucks in 7.
All right, Tim, your thoughts?
Yeah, I definitely thought Will was going in a different direction with that one, but I really have to say the Bucks have come off to a slow start. They really haven't proven to be the number one team in the NBA, which a lot of people have them as the number one team and the team to beat in the finals, but the Heat have really come on to a strong start as well, but I don't see them taking on Giannis and beating them in a 7-game series, so I have to go with the Bucks as well.
Joseph agrees with you guys. He's picking the Bucks, but Jared and Paul are going to pick the Miami Heat, and I agree with them. I see the Heat pulling off the upset for all of the things Will actually listed. I think they have better depth. I think they've been more consistent, and they've gotten off on the right foot as far as this restart play and the playoffs themselves are considered. So I'm going with the Miami Heat on this one. And then the other second-round series in the East, our final pick-em, we've got the Boston Celtics against the Toronto Raptors. You're picking that one?
You're going to hate this, Marko, but I think you're too in on the Celtics. Raptors have been amazing, dude. I know they were only playing against the Nets, who are a weird kind of chop shop compilation of spare parts, but still, that's 150 points, and 100 of those were from the bench, with Kyle Lowry sitting most of that game. I think the Raptors can beat the Celtics.
With the core group that the Raptors have right now, that have really taken control of the team after Kawhi Leonard left this past year, the Raptors have just been on fire. I mean, and the Celtics losing Gordon Hayward, maybe not as significant as a blow as it would be if he was a main player on that team, but still a blow nonetheless. And the Raptors have all the depth that they need. And Fred VanVleet has been amazing. Players have been stepping up for the Raptors. And so with that being said, I have to go with the Raptors in this one.
Jared is going to pick Toronto in this one, as will Paul. And then Joseph is going to pick the Celtics. And I'll agree with Joseph.
Homer.
I know it doesn't look good with Gordon Hayward being out, but Kyle Lowry's a bit beat up. And as far as the 1, 2, 3, the three best players, I certainly trust Kemba and Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown a lot more than I do trust whoever the three best players on the Raptors are. And I think that is the core issue. I know Pascal Siakam gets kind of put as the face of the Raptors, but I think VanVleet is dangerous. I think Lowry's dangerous, and Ibaka can have his nights. So I think depth-wise, I think the Raptors certainly have an advantage, but I think the Celtics are top-heavy enough that I think in the clutch moments, they'll know who they need to go to. And I think they'll pull it off. But it's going to be probably the closest playoff series we've seen so far. I think it's going to come down to the wire in 7 games. But I think Boston, in the end, with a bit more of a top-heavy roster as far as the three best players being very excellent, I have to go with Boston on that one. Before we move to some news out of Philadelphia, I just want to do some quick lightning round news about some news around the NBA. So I just want your guys' quick takes on Giannis winning the Defensive Player of the Year award. He's just the 5th player ever to win both MVP and Defensive Player of the Year, the others being Kevin Garnett, David the Admiral Robinson, Hakeem Olajuwon, and the GOAT Michael Jordan. What are your guys' thoughts of him accomplishing this so early on in his career?
I mean, it's totally earned, and honestly, he's probably going to win the MVP this year too, which would be absolutely insane.
And to go off of that, I believe MJ is the only one to ever win MVP and Defensive Player of the Year in the same season. I may be wrong on that, but that's yet another thing to add to his list of accomplishments.
But I mean, Giannis has been absolutely dominant. He's been the best player in the league. Definitely on defense and on most areas of offense. I mean, obviously that perimeter shot getting better, but still not probably at MVP level. But that's almost more impressive because regardless of that, in a 3-point shooting league, and he's no Ben Simmons, he can take a 3, he can make 3-point shots, but like Giannis just excelled on both ends of the court better than anyone in the league. He deserves the MVP and defensive MVP.
Yeah, and Tim, your quick thoughts on that?
I mean, Giannis has been the best of the best this past year and last year as well. So definitely kind of an easy choice there for me, honestly. Played extremely well on the offensive end and backed it up with his defense as well, which is amazing, especially because if what you're saying is true, with MJ being the only other person to win both awards, MVP and Defensive Player of the Year in the same year. A huge feat at such a young stage in his career still, which is insane to think about, but so much more coming from Giannis in the future for sure.
And then just one other quick piece of lightning round news before we move on, again, to the big news out of Philadelphia. Nate McMillan was fired by the Pacers just after being swept by the Heat. He's got a career record of 661 and 588, so just about a 53% winning percentage. And in his 4 seasons with the Pacers, had a record of 183 and 136. They made the playoffs all 4 years, but were eliminated in the first round each of those years, being swept 3 out of those 4 times. So just your thoughts on, maybe some middling playoff success, but just not enough for Indiana to keep him around?
Yeah, that was pretty dumb, honestly. Oladipo's not 100%. Sabonis is out. Warren's a bit banged up. McMillan's a really good coach. There's no denying he's a good coach. I don't think they gave him enough time. I think it was I don't think there's enough past precedent to fire him, and I don't think this playoff run should justify his firing. So I'm pretty unhappy about this move, actually.
I agree with you. I think, considering the circumstances, like you said, especially, what do you want him to do?
He coached the hell out of that team.
Yeah, Miami's, yes, it was a sweep, but in 3 out of the 4 games, it was close towards the end. And Miami is on fire right now. Some of us even picked them to upset the Milwaukee Bucks. So, I really don't know what Indiana's doing right now. Tim, any thoughts on this firing?
I mean, nothing more that's already been said. I mean, he was working with a real injured roster. A lot of players weren't playing 100%, and that definitely led to being at a disadvantage, especially when you're playing a team like the Heat that will just take advantage of those injuries, take advantage of those empty spots on the court, and just that's what they ended up doing. And so I definitely don't think that this was warranted. I think this they'll look back and look at this as a mistake, but I wish the best for him, and I think he's going to find a job elsewhere.
All right, so moving on to another team that was swept in the first round that fired their coach almost immediately after. Brett Brown has been fired after 7 seasons as the head coach of the Philadelphia 76ers. He had a record of 221 and 344, although he was 146 and 91 in the past 3 seasons. In those past 3 seasons, they did make the playoffs every one of those years. In 2018 and 19, they were eliminated in the conference semifinals. Well, in this past season, they were swept out by the Boston Celtics in the first round. So just your thoughts on maybe the overall tenure of Brett Brown in Philadelphia and the future maybe in Philadelphia right now as we speak?
Unlike McMillan, you could see this one coming. McMillan has gotten tremendous success out of a middling roster. Brown's really gotten nothing from a pretty impressive roster featuring, he's had some big stars. He's had Embiid, Simmons, Jimmy Butler, then Tobias Harris, and Al Horford were in the mix. There's been a lot of guys. Markelle Fultz, there's been a lot of big names at the Sixers teams. Brown hasn't done much. I mean, I was reading an Athletic article about it. Sam Hinkie, the guy who hired him, really kind of thought he was like a 3-year guy. He's good at developing youth, and he's a positive guy. He's good with the media, so he'd be good for that process team that was just atrocious. But I don't think anyone expected him to last 7 seasons. I know there's a lot of support from around the league. Guys like Stephen A. Smith seem to really like him, but I mean, the time had come for Brett Brown because he really just couldn't figure out how to get his team together.
I think the words that come to mind is about time. The team really underperformed with him at the helm, and they just need a change up in the coaching position because obviously something wasn't working with Brett Brown coaching this team. This team is a lot better than a first round knockout, and I definitely think the executives saw that, and that's why they acted.
And to be fair, on Brett Brown's part, his 2 stars, Joel Embiid and Ben Simmons, they don't blend well on the court. And honestly, the biggest problem with those 2 isn't necessarily what they do on the court, but in the words of Charles Barkley, the best ability is availability. And these guys have racked up hundreds of DMPs on their own, and well over 300 combined in just the past few seasons, let alone their entire careers. So, Brett Brown wasn't always playing with a full deck as far as his coaching abilities were concerned with the availability of his players. But I guess, they had him since the beginning of the process. In that vein, I'd love to play a little game here called Trust the Process or Trade the Process. And I know a lot of people are considering Ben Simmons to be the tradable asset, but just for this game in particular, we'll only be looking at trading Joel Embiid. So I'm just going to run through a couple of potential trade options. And you guys very just briefly tell me trust or trade. So really quick, Joel Embiid being traded to the Golden State Warriors for Andrew Wiggins, the 2nd overall pick, and then maybe a few minimum players to balance the cap.
Absolutely not.
Trust.
Yeah, I'll have to say trust the process on that one. I'd take Embiid. Next up, we've got Joel Embiid being traded to the Phoenix Suns for Devin Booker.
Trust. Easy.
Yeah, trust. I mean, you can't do that.
See, I would have to say trade the process. I think Booker is a great shooter, and the biggest problem this team has is spacing. And I think Devin Booker is a phenomenal player, but it's all up to the system you want to run. But I think, especially for today's league, I think Devin Booker is a bit more valuable than Joel Embiid, whether he's better than him or not. And then speaking of trading him for a shooting guard, next up we have Embiid being traded to Washington for Bradley Beal.
Trust. Easy.
Yeah, I don't think that is a valuable trade option. I'd have to trust as well.
So I would have to say trade. I think, again, in the same manner that a shooter, a guard would do this team well, some spacing. I think Bradley Beal is definitely an option to trade Embiid for. And then lastly, we have trading Joel Embiid to OKC for Chris Paul.
Trust.
I'd say trust as well. I mean, I think the main issue that we're seeing there is these guys may be good at maybe good shooters, but Joel Embiid brings a different aspect to the game and they could really get a lot more than these men from Joel Embiid than what we're showing right now.
Joel is absolutely going to be a once in a. He's the next great center. He might be the last great. The way things are moving, he might be the last great in the paint center. Jokic is sort of in there, but at the same time, Jokic does more than Embiid. He does more than most centers ever have. But Embiid's kind of your last classic big man. He can shoot it a bit. The problem with your game, Marco, isn't that your trades are bad. I mean, I really thought about that Chris Paul one. It was just an age thing for me.
Right.
It's that you're trying to trade the wrong guy out of Philadelphia.
Yeah, and that's what I was saying in the fact that we're looking at Joel Embiid right now. But I agree with you, and we'll definitely look at that next week. I agree with you. Ben Simmons is the guy to look at to trade, but we can definitely get into that in the near future. With that, we're going to move to some college football and say goodbye to Will Byerman and bring Paul Hires in. Will, thanks so much, and we'll see you next week.
Hey, good to be back, boys.
All right, so again, Paul Hires joining us as we discuss some college football. Again, the landscape of college football looking drastically different from how it usually does. The Big 10 and Pac-12, again, not playing in the fall, despite some protests and a bit of pushback from some student organizations and some parent organizations. What are you guys' thoughts on this pushback? And do we think that there's a potential for a reversal if there's enough pushback from these organizations or a change of mind by one of the conferences?
Definitely not. These organizations, although you like what they're doing, you obviously want college football, but in the end, this is all about kind of the safety of the people. And I just don't see the Big 10 or Pac-12 reversing any decisions that they've made. We might be looking at a spring start, which I'm sure we'll talk about in a little bit. But as of right now, I just don't see this as a viable option. I don't see any type of players pushing them in the opposite direction.
And I can see where the players are coming from. I mean, you talk about just playing games in conference even wouldn't be that bad. I mean, you're putting yourself at just as much risk, going to school. But at the end of the day, those big corporations, when they make a decision, they're not going to change their minds. So I agree with Tim. I don't think they're going to have football this fall.
Yeah, and I completely agree with you guys. And that conversation kind of lends us to the viability of spring football. I said it from the very start on this podcast that there was no way we'd be playing football in the fall. And I guess some conferences are somehow still believing that. But I think more than likely, for sure, the Big 10 and Pac-12 will look to play football in the spring if it's viable. And then potentially these conferences that are still trying to play in the fall, they will move to a spring model eventually here. But what are your guys' thoughts on the viability of a spring football season, considering the window of the NFL draft also an issue, and then the potential looming effects of the coronavirus still being around in February and March? What are your thoughts on those effects?
I mean, you got flu season, you got COVID season, all in the winter. It's just not a viable option for me. I don't think that this is a position that we can really protect the players as much as they can if that's their goal. So if we're not going to play in the fall, we're sure as heck not going to play in the spring. I don't see this as an option that's going to end up happening. Like, as much as we all want college football, I think this is just going to be, unless they're able to do some more research, find a more efficient way, and kind of set forth a plan early. I think that was a big issue with this past cancellation of the fall season for some of the conferences, because it was kind of pushed off. Instead of a plan made for possibly playing, the decision was pushed off until they finally cut it off. So the spring football season option is just not something that's going to take on.
And you're saying that as far as the fact that you don't want fall football to happen either, and you're saying there's still not a viability for spring football based on the issues that we're dealing with right now, right?
Well, I'm saying so unless they set forth a plan early, not something that's kind of real fast and kind of a quick decision made. If they start a plan early to see if they can start a spring football season, I think that's going to be a more possible option. But as of right now, if we continue and just wait and push off the decision, it's for sure going to be a no.
Yeah, and I think it's an option, but at this point, it's kind of up in the air just because we don't know where the pandemic is going to be at in the spring and if it's going to get any better. We know that, with the colder season, viruses tend to be worse. And so if things don't get better soon here, I don't think it's a possibility. And even if it is a possibility, like you mentioned, you run into issues with players probably leaving early, to focus on getting into the NFL, getting into the draft and things like that. And not only that, but then you would be trying to turn around and play another football season in the fall of 2021, which would then lead to, are we trying to play 2 full football seasons in one calendar year? I mean, we talked about how brutal the sport is to the body and just recovering and things of that nature. How are we going to try and make 2 seasons happen in one calendar year? I mean, you have maybe a championship in May or something, and then you turn around and start fall camp again in August. It just seems really hard to squeeze another season in, and I don't think it's going to happen.
And Paul, that final point you made is, I think, what will eventually be the nail in the coffin for spring football. I don't know what's going to happen with the remainder of this fall season. Again, we still have 3 Power 5 conferences attempting to play. Whether they play this season out, whether they finish, whether they even have a national championship, the argument whether that's a legitimate champion is really not the argument, or the discussion, I should say, that we should be having. I think the point you made is very valid. The Big Ten and Pac-12 made certain decisions about the health and wellness of their players, and that has to extend out into the spring because those issues, like you said, COVID's not going away. And of course, then you have the winter weather, and then trying to play 2 seasons in one calendar year. There's just a time crunch that will exist with a spring season that also makes it just as unviable as a fall season at this current moment.
Yeah, and I think that if they do get this season kicked off, if they don't cancel it before their first scheduled games, I don't see it going more than about 4 or 5 weeks before they have to shut it down again.
Yeah, college football is currently in shambles, still trying to collect itself, and some conferences trying to push forward and play a fall season. And just like Paul said, I do not believe that will occur. I think this fall season will be pretty short-lived. All right, well, that's it for us talking college football. Tim, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
And Paul, also, we will see you next week.
All right, sounds good.
All right, so next up, we'll be talking some Champions League soccer and some big Lionel Messi news. Joseph Reno, welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, happy to be here. Thanks for having me. We've had a fantastic week in the world of soccer, so happy to talk about it.
Yeah, a lot to discuss, and we'll start first off with Bayern Munich winning the 2020 Champions League, and on top of that, winning the treble. They've gone unbeaten in the calendar year of 2020. Just your overall thoughts on this season so far, for I guess this season that Bayern Munich just had.
Yeah, absolutely. So they started off in what feels like so long ago now, at the beginning of 2019. They were pretty poor. They weren't doing very well. They were 7th in the Bundesliga at November 3rd when they played against Eintracht Frankfurt. They lost 5-1 under their former coach, Niko Kovac. And they fired him immediately after that game. At that point, they were 10-3-3, had 24 goals against. And like I said, they were 7th in the Bundesliga. And after that, they put in their interim manager. They didn't intend to have him for too long until they found a replacement, but he was just the man for the job, Hansi Flick. Since then, they have gone 32-1-2, which is incredible for any level of soccer. They're just phenomenal. And on top of it, they were doing it in the Champions League. They were doing it in the Bundesliga, and they just ran away with it this year after November 2nd.
So with what you're saying, that the kind of change happened with appointing Hansi Flick first to interim and then making him the full coach. He's got a contract all the way through the summer of 2023. Obviously you mentioned the poor start despite how well they finished. So what has Hansi Flick done both tactically to reinvigorate this team, but really in choosing players, how he operates? What is different with the way Hansi Flick is running things versus how Niko Kovac ran things?
Well, Niko Kovac, he was not playing the right personnel. He had some good players under his tenure that he just was not using. Mainly, number one would be Thomas Müller. He was just completely underused. He was spending a lot of time on the bench, but but immediately when Hansi Flick took over, he put him right in that center attacking mid Raumdeuter role, which is his preferred position, just filling in the gaps. And he's such an intelligent player. He fills those gaps perfectly and plays them to perfection. His presence was felt almost immediately when Flick took over. Along with him, David Alaba was moved to center back, and in his place, Alphonso Davies, the 19-year-old Canadian sensation, took over, and he's been lighting it up in the Bundesliga, in the Champions League, everywhere. They've been playing with a high line, which has been kind of new for them, but it allows Davies to attack and press and almost act like another left wing. We saw that against Barcelona when he just smoked Semedo for that assist to Kimmich. He's just been incredible, and anyone who's been paying attention for the whole year knows that. That high press system has just been fantastic for them. It worked perfectly against PSG. They would win the ball back high up the pitch, so they didn't have to go too far. Granted, they did get that one goal where Coman just headed it in perfectly, but it was perfect. Mbappe, Neymar, they never got chances to attack because of that high press. So
yeah, the high press system under Hansi Flick is highly effective, and it's really fun to watch. And obviously, it operates the way it does because of the players he's put in the system. You mentioned putting Müller back at the Raumdeuter position, which for those of you that don't know German, that loosely translates to either space investigator or space invader, which is just perfect to describe the way Müller plays. He just kind of wanders around and looks for space, and allowing him to do that is tremendous. And then, of course, you've got the extra guy up top to help press, and then making Lewandowski an active presser. But just a question as far as, somebody you mentioned, do you think Alphonso Davies is the best left back in the world? If not the best, at least one of the best?
I think that for a left back, I think he's still got some room, but
especially
effectively, yes,
yeah.
Exactly, defensively. But for the way that he's been used, there is nobody better in his position for the tactical way that Hansi Flick uses him. His attacking mindset, he used to be more of an attacking player when he was at Vancouver and earlier in his career. And now, I still feel crazy saying earlier, he's 19 years old. He's younger than me. And I think that he's only got to go up from here. He's going to be one of the best players, bar none, in the world in the next coming years.
But before we get to what this Bayern team can be in the future, let's just really stop and marvel at this 2020 Bayern side. And how do you think they compare to other trebles, other European trebles?
Some of the names that you immediately start to think about were the 1999 Manchester United side under Sir Alex Ferguson. Obviously, they won it in England, which has never been done before or since. They were an incredibly dominant team. I do think that this Bayern team, though, would be a little bit better than them. That team was very characteristic for, Fergie time, which was late goals, late equalizers, things that got them the points that they needed at the very death. And this Bayern team just does not give up. They do not give in to those last-minute goals. They are playing all the way till the end. And I do think that Bayern Munich would be better than them. The other sides that I immediately think of when you say best treble-winning teams, 2009 Barcelona under Guardiola, 2010 Inter Milan under Mourinho, and then the other Barcelona team, 2015 under Luis Enrique. All of those are phenomenal, but this Bayern team, there's just something about them that it doesn't. They were shocking us at every stage when they played Barcelona, when they were playing Lyon. Even they were surprising us with how good they were. So I think that this team this is one for the ages, honestly.
Right, and this is also Bayern's second treble. Of course, their 2013 team also won the treble. This 20, nothing against that 2013 team, but this 2020 team far surpasses the talent of that 2013 team. And something you mentioned when we were talking about Davies, the youth. Also, you've got Leroy Sané that they're just purchasing from Manchester City, not to mention in the most Bayern way possible, getting the best bargain. And a bunch of other young wingers, Coman, Gnabry, and Goretzka, and Kimmich, and Lucas Hernandez, and Nicolas Schürrle. A lot of youth all over the place. Is Bayern potentially the next European football dynasty?
I think that the second season is going to be something that really defines them. Right now, they are playing some phenomenal football, and I think that they can only go up from here if they want to be a dynasty. They have to improve. Anytime you see a team try to be a dynasty, obviously they already are in Germany, but now we're looking to the European stage. Are they going to be able to get far? Are they going to be able to win it again? We'll have to see. Leroy Sané definitely helps their case as an additional striker, but I think that they are going to be very, very scary to face, especially that left-hand side. If Sané does line up on the left-hand side, you've got Sané and Davies, and that is an absolute nightmare for right backs.
Yeah, and another thing to mention is we talked about the 2013 Champions League winning side for Bayern Munich. What is crazy to think is Bayern has been so dominant in Germany that they have won the German Bundesliga every single year, even before that 2013 Champions League winning season. They've won 8 straight Bundesliga titles, and I believe they've won at least 5 or 6 DFB Pokals in that time also, of course, that being the German Cup. So plenty of potential for more troubles in the future, at least the near future for Bayern. They've been tremendous. But now moving to the more recent news from this week, it's probably the biggest news in world football that we've had in a very, very long time. By facts, Lionel Messi has let the Barcelona board know that he wants out of Barcelona. Yeah, and there's very few words to explain how this must feel for not just Barcelona fans, but fans of world football. Messi has been at Barcelona since 2001. It's slightly akin to Tom Brady leaving the New England Patriots, but even that taken to a whole nother level. Do you think Messi actually wants out, or is this a bargaining chip to try and remove some of the board members from Barcelona?
I think he honestly wants out. He's been using this sort of "I want to leave if things don't change" for a while now. And as recently as 2 weeks ago, he put in kind of an ultimatum, and he said to the president of the club, "It's either you or it's me. You need to step down and leave, or I will."
And that's Bartomeu, the president of Barcelona. And really, you're correct. He was using that kind of rhetoric. And pretty much since the 8-2 defeat to Bayern Munich in the quarterfinals of the Champions League, it seemed almost pretty inevitable, which is crazy to think about, the fact that we're going to see Lionel Messi potentially and more than likely in a different jersey come fall time. But obviously, then that lends us to probably the biggest talking point in world football at this moment. What jersey will that be? Obviously, financially speaking, the field is limited to probably 10 teams or less. I'll just run off a few, and you can let me know what you think of these. Obviously, from England, potentially Chelsea. I mean, they're on a crazy spending spree. Of course, both Manchester teams. In Germany, Bayern Munich is a potential possibility. In Italy, you have Juve and probably Inter, also a possibility. In Spain, I mean, anything is possible at this point. So maybe Real Madrid. I really don't. Maybe PSG in France is probably the only other possibility. Other than that, I mean, what are your thoughts on any of those possibilities?
So immediately, I do feel like he still is going to have some loyalty to Barcelona. So that rules out Real Madrid or Atletico Madrid at all.
Right. So that leaves us basically with about 7 options.
Yeah. And to kind of go through individually, I don't think Bayern is going to look to get him. They're going to be looking for more youth, not age. They do have a very old roster right now, so I don't think that they're going to want to get someone who they're going to have to pay big bucks to play for maybe 2 years.
Right,
So,
and just another quick point to bring up. Messi is on more than €1 million a week in salary, 10 million in image rights, and an extra 13 million in signing bonus each year. There's a lot going on there. And really quick, sorry, we did forget to mention that he it's not a guarantee that he can leave the club. Again, he signed a new contract in 2017 through, I believe, 2021 with a stipulation that at the end of each season, as long as he tells Barcelona by May 31st that he could leave the club for free without having to activate that €700 million release clause. However, again, we are past May 31st. So now there's a legal fight that will ensue between Barcelona saying that time has passed and Messi saying, well, the season's still going on. How could I have known before May 31st? So we'll touch on that just quick after you go through the rest of these clubs.
I think that the realistic spots, there's about 3 that I can think of. Paris Saint-Germain, but even they, I think, are a little iffy on whether or not they would get him. I mean, they signed Neymar to kind of bring him out of Messi's shadow, and then I don't think they would want to upset their 212 million pound man to bring in Lionel Messi for another 2 years. Inter Milan, I think, is another option. They do have a lot of money. The only issue there is Messi is leaving Barcelona because he wants to win. And Inter Milan, while they've been good, have not shown that they can win yet. So I think that would be too much of a gamble. Right now, the number one spot that I'm looking at is Manchester City. It's got Pep Guardiola at the helm. They're playing the kind of football that Messi would love to play under. Right now, they have Sterling, Gabriel Jesus, and Aguero. And the three of them kind of play interchange with one another. So I think there could be a definite spot for him to play on the right wing, maybe a little bit withheld off of the forward. And I think that could be a perfect situation for him. They can definitely afford him as well.
And another point with that Manchester City point is they often play with two attacking mids, and they just let David Silva go back to La Liga. I believe he went to Real Betis or one of those teams. So now there's an opening there for him. Obviously, doesn't probably hold the same wage that Lionel Messi would demand, but at least there's an opening on the pitch for him. And that's a potential. And then just that last team that you thought is a potential landing spot for him?
It would be Manchester City, but the other one would be Juventus, just because of there was a report today that Adidas was pushing for that a little bit, as they would like to see Ronaldo and Messi link up for at least a year. I think that would be good for Adidas's marketing, but I don't know how realistic that is given the current climate. But Manchester City is number one right now. There was also a deal that I saw on the table that Manchester City would get him for 3 years, and then after that, he would be contracted to their sister club, New York City FC, here in the MLS. So he would potentially come here after 3 years. So I think that would be a very appetizing thing for him.
Yeah, I was going to mention that. I agree with you. I think Manchester City is the final landing spot here for Messi as far as we're concerned. It's really the only one that makes perfect sense. As we ran down, again, when you look at the finances, when you look at the space on the field, when you look at where he wants to be marketing-wise, and salary-wise, it really only makes sense to have Manchester City. Of course, he's also got Pep Guardiola and the style of play there. Manchester City is the landing spot for Messi. And the 3+3 deal that they discussed, that could be on the table, 3 years at Manchester City, 3 years in New York City FC. I think that's perfect for Messi as far as getting a chance at some more Champions League glory before he leaves Europe, as well as, trying, showing people he can win in a different league, a different style of play than La Liga. Playing in the Premier League. And then, of course, he's already the most popular athlete on the planet, but the explosion of popularity he would receive, still having, quite a lot of ability, and then playing in the MLS would be massive for his net worth.
The one obstacle about him playing at Manchester City would be the play style. The English game is so much more physical than it is in La Liga or anywhere else. And I think that he would struggle to adapt for a bit.
He could be shielded from that, though, as far as, especially with the two attacking midfielders, maybe Manchester City could drop off and play a 4-2-3-1 or a 4-3-3 with two defensive mids, and have maybe a box-to-box mid and a defensive mid that stays all the way back, and he wouldn't have to track back as much. I'm sure Pep wouldn't ask him to do as much.
Mm-hmm.
And if they played him out wide, he wouldn't have to stay out and cover the opposing fullback. I'm sure he could drift in and move around wherever he wanted. I do agree with you that those are some legitimate concerns, but I think if you've got the best player in the world, you work around those weaknesses and those concerns, and they certainly would. Let's just quickly look at the other side of the coin. As far as Barcelona, how do they rebuild if they lose Messi and more than likely also Suarez and Jordi Alba and Sergio Busquets and a few other of those veterans?
So when you look at Barcelona's main squad, they are primarily all over 30, over 31, over 32. Even Rakitic is 32, Gerard Piqué is 33, Messi is 33. Basically everywhere on the field, they have just got aging players. But the thing is, they have a lot of youth on the bench. Coutinho is not too young. He's going to be coming back after his loan spell to Bayern Munich. Dembele is always a very promising talent, although he is a little injury prone. Ansu Fati is a guy that I think could be the potential future of Barcelona. And then Antoine Griezmann. I think they have the talent to do okay, but if we're looking at it from a outside standpoint, I do think that they are going to be pretty poor for the next year to 2 years until they get a good manager, get some good players that they can rely on, and we'll see from there. But I think they need to get a much better manager than Ronald Koeman, who they just brought in. It does seem to be their kind of shooting themselves in the foot every time they get a new coach. It's not the guy. So they haven't had their guy since about 2015.
Well, and even there's rumors that this is just a 1-year replacement to then bring in Xavi as the coach for Barcelona. And maybe that's their hope to get Messi to stay. But there's still, again, we will talk about this every single week until it's resolved, and even beyond that probably, because it is the most fascinating story in world football right now. Joseph, thank you so much for joining us on this week's episode.
Thanks for having me. I'll see you next week.
All right, and that is also it for this week's episode. Thank you so much for joining us. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and click that notification bell to get notified every time we upload a podcast or another video. Also, leave your own unqualified opinions in the comments section down below. Thank you guys so much for watching, listening, wherever you were and however you listened. Thank you so much, and we will see you next time.